Hello, everybody. Welcome to Presence of Mind, brought to you by KP and Cloud9. I am one of your wonderful hosts, Khalif Adams, and I'm joined this week and every other week with Greg Miller and Alana Pierce. How are you doing? Both of you wonderful folks. How's everything going?
Doing good, doing good.
I
You
can't
know,
complain. We made it through another
floating
day.
in the sky. We did.
Exactly. You're floating in the sky as always, Alana.
Right? Having a great time.
Awesome. Excited to see you both here again, both in the sky and on the ground. We're both rocking it here on Twitch. Thank you, everybody, for coming through and hanging out. If you missed the last episode, we got to speak to Annie Dro of the Cloud9 team, all about toxicity. And this week, we're going to be talking about trolling, which, of course, on April Fool's Day is the perfect conversation to have when it comes to conversations around things that you may not necessarily have thought of to discuss with your friends about the actual act of trolling on April Fool's Day. Really quick before we jump into what we're doing here and the actual topic at hand, are you both okay today with April Fool's Day? I know April Fool's Day is one of those things where people have very, very strong opinions about the day and the meaning and how things kind of work. Alana, what are your thoughts about April Fool's Day?
I think I really liked it when I was a kid and it was stuff that you did with your friends and your family.
Yeah.
I've always found that very fun. But then when it became this corporate thing where every brand felt that they had to get involved by like one-upping the lie, it became a thing that was like, oh, we get it, you're trying to make money. And it just like kind of ruined some of it. Some of them get really creative and fun and the teams do cool stuff like the Garrus body pillow today. I was like, okay, that's actually very, very fun, but also for purchase. So not actually, I wasn't tricked.
Hey man, people want it, right? That's yeah. That was what sometimes the fool is going to be things people they actually want it.
Yeah. And I think some of it is like there's some ways that it can be harmful. I think it happened more last year, maybe less so this year. The routine of like straight people pretending to come out as gay. It's like things like that that they think are really funny that I think are things that, I don't really think that we should all be like, well, it's April 1st. That's a good, you're gay. That's hilarious. I think there's like some things that, I don't feel like are appropriate, but I do think there's a lot of fun you can have with it with friends and family for sure. The internet is where everything gets sticky.
Yeah. Greg, any thoughts on April 1st, on April Fool's Day?
I think April Fool's Day, I think, matters less and less the older you get, right? For me, every time it rolls around, I'm just like, isn't this played out? But then you have to remember that like it's always going to be somebody's first one because not first April Fool's, but the first time you got really well, right?
Yeah.
And I always go back to the IGN Zelda movie trailer, right?
Yeah.
Like that they dropped, and that was a different time of what we were expecting out of the internet, which sounds crazy now, but we're all fossils, so we remember it.
Yeah.
And now you get to that point where there's always one that will get me because I'm not paying attention. We're all dealing with our lives. There's a million other things going on. And some headline comes across, usually on March 31st, which isn't even April Fool's Day. And you're like, and then you get into like, it's April. Oh, this is going to be an entire day of this. And there are the ones that are good, that are funny, that are cute. But then there's just so many where you're like, all right, like this just doesn't work for anybody as an audience.
Yeah. I think the volume of it is where the problem came through. It's like some people doing it was fun. And then when it's just everyone and it's your whole timeline, especially at a point in time where there's so much misinformation anyway.
Yep.
It's just like, wow, I'm tired.
Yeah, you're just like, my brain is already broken most of the time. I really don't need anyone else doing it and getting paid for it while they wind up doing it in that way. So again, thank you everybody for being here. And if you haven't checked out the previous shows, this is all about mental health and well-being. We want to encourage teens and young adults to kind of prioritize their mental health and give them some positive mental conversations and images and messages so that they'll be able to kind of build more empathy and reduce stigma around all the things that we kind of see in the online spaces. So it's fun to be able to do this. And this week, this episode 2, being around trolling is going to be really interesting because as three folks on the internet a lot, having done this work for a fair amount of time, I'm sure we've all absolutely have both been a part of trolling, have engaged in trolling, have been the troll and the trollee in multiple parts of the equation. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about, how you've kind of come around on trolling, your kind of general thoughts about the practice, and how have you kind of managed to get out of some of the trolling that has been on the internet with you, about you, to you, scathed or unscathed? I'm going to go to Greg first and ask you that one.
Well, I want to flip it on you, Kai,
Oh, snap.
and have you define, what are we defining tonight as trolling? What are we talking about when we say trolling? Because that is a broad topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can break down into a couple of different ways in my mind. I think that some of the conversations around trolling, a lot of it winds up kind of starting in our minds in terms of being fairly mean spirited, comments towards someone else, or kind of using something that you may know about a person against them,
Sure.
to kind of build out, not negative energy, but kind of just the ability to say that you kind of gotten them in some form or fashion, to say that I got one up on you in some way. I feel like there's also some good ways to troll. I think there's a nice way to do it, and we'll talk about that too during the episode tonight. But yeah, I think that's the way that I would kind of loosely define it, is kind of using energy towards someone in a potentially negative way through words, images, or speech in that way.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets to a really interesting, fascinating conversation I'm excited to have with you two tonight, where it is this idea that I think now when you say trolling, right, I think of the internet, I think of comment sections, I think of on Reddit, conversations that are being derailed, that people are trying to make a point, but as you're saying, they've hung up on one thing you may have done years ago on a podcast, or you've said on this, and they're just trying to keep you from making your point and getting so loud that they're taking up all the oxygen in the room, getting away from the actual problem at hand. And I think when you take that further back and when you take it to the definition you're going from, I think it gets really interesting of what I would call giving someone grief, right?
Hmm.
Like giving your friends shit, as we all do. And we were talking about this before we went live, right? Like if Alana's nice to you,
I just saw
she
the
doesn't
dog.
like you. She doesn't like you if Alana's nice to you. If Alana's giving you hell, you know that, all right, cool, you're cool, you're friends, right? And like that's where you get into such an interesting mix of the internet, where I think it's something I struggled with growing up, because in my friend group, I was bitingly sarcastic, and it
Yeah.
was that thing of I was the funny guy, so it was about making jokes. But to your point, it would eventually go too far, right, where I would be using something I knew from that is a real hang up for my best friend, so a real relationship or something I'm bringing into this space that took it too far, and it's making everyone else in the room laugh, but it's making them feel bad. And now you can extrapolate that, I think, to what trolling on the internet is, and there's so many different emotions tied up in that.
Yeah. Alana, any thoughts to kind of add to the conversation of not only what trolling is, but how you've kind of seen it play out, and how you might even engage in it?
Language changes. So I troll a lot with great frequency, and not just to people I know. So like there's this one particular person I follow on Instagram who will occasionally post pictures with a baby, which is his brother's baby. So he'll be like, in the caption, it's like, so proud to be an uncle. I will always write the comment of, oh my God, when did you become a dad? I'm not doing it for him. I am doing it for everyone who follows him to be like, this bitch is so dumb. It clearly says uncle. And I do it almost every time.
Do you know this person?
To do with it. Yeah.
Okay.
So he knows that I'm joking, but his comment section does not. And I think he has about 1 million followers, and they always get really mad at like I get called stupid, and they're like, can't you read? And I find that very funny. I also really like doing it to like basically anyone who's a public figure who like wouldn't respond to me but has a big enough platform that a lot of people will see it. Like I do it to Elon Musk tweets a lot, where I'll just say something that is really dumb or like actively hostile, like in a way that like I'm not insulting them, I'm the butt of the joke by making myself sound really stupid. And then loads of people flood in and like call me an idiot.
Yeah.
Like, can't believe you're employed. Like, but I find it so funny. And that's kind of like what I feel like trolling actually is, and how I've done it even in real life is, I remember like in school, there was just this one day where I managed to really successfully troll someone by trying to convince them that I thought that Ash Ketchum's name in Pokemon was actually Ash Ketchup. And this was before it was easy enough for you to bring out a phone and be like, it says Ketchum. So I was just like, it's Ketchup. Ketchum's not a real name. It's Ketchup because it's based on a town that's in Pokemon. I know that this isn't true, but I'm saying it to get someone really riled up about how stupid I am. Oh yeah, that's what I think trolling is. And I love it to bits. It's something I do all the time and I find really funny. Even though I'm the butt of the joke, by making myself stupid.
Well,
And
see,
a lot of people don't know I'm joking.
And that's the best part about that kind of trolling, is that for me, that is almost performance art, where
Right.
you're walking into your friend's comments, right, and screwing around. Or in this thing, you're saying something so ridiculous, right, that like, no, like, that's not ketchup. What are you talking about? And like,
Yeah.
you know that they're in there and they kind of have that smile as they argue with you, but you're so committed to it. Like, that's the trolling I think so many people enjoy and want to be a part of. And then it's just that thing of it becomes a slippery slope where it's so easy to cross that line, Khalif.
Yeah, and I think that that's been one of the most interesting things. Again, I'll use Twitter as the main example because that's where I spend most of my social media time. Is seeing just how much that has changed over the past 10 years of me being on that platform, where there was a space where it felt like there was some walls there where people were kind of able to either take a light spirited joke and kind of absorb that and then maybe reflect that back out into the world. But now, even with the conversations, because everything is so heightened in terms of visibility and the political sphere and how that's kind of broadened out people's emotional capacity to kind of like absorb information. We talked a little bit about this, because it's April Fool's Day and why it's so difficult to what's real anymore in terms of what we see. Yeah, it's been a really wild time to kind of see trolls not only kind of become figures in the space, but also become kind of more legitimized because of the way that social media has kind of worked in that way too, where we see now, organizations, we see, other, entertainers,
Anonymous is
anonymous.
almost
Yeah,
like
right.
a political level troll.
Yeah, right. It was like a social movement or a bunch of folks who believed in a couple of things that they really wanted to get out into the world and said, hey, we're going to use that power of trolling. And we're going to talk a little bit about meme culture during this episode as well, to kind of get the one-upsmanship on, political figures and other folks in that space too. So it is super, super wild in that way. I definitely am on the kind of lighthearted troll side of that too. If anyone has been paying attention to the nonsensical year and a half beef between myself and Paris Lily, that is
I
the
love
best
it.
version of trolling that I've been
So
able
good.
to engage with. We're just talking a whole bunch of mess about the way each other cooks, which has been super fun. And it's random now at this point where I can be talking about flowers and he'll just randomly come up and was like, yo, your food sucks. So again, there's like ways to do, but I do want to talk about the we have our wonderful local clinician Gino in the back who we get a chance to talk to about some of the topics of why trolling has become a thing, and why the negative version of trolling has become more prevalent. So I asked the question to him behind the scenes and said, are there any kind of benefits to trolling, or kind of where does trolling kind of stem from? And an answer that was shared was, so it kind of turns out that our parents were right. That most bullies tend to bully about their own insecurities, and that there have been studies that individuals have expressed that most explicit things such as homophobia had higher biological attraction signals towards same-sex individuals, despite denying a same-sex interest. So people are kind of what's the word that I'm looking for?
Projecting.
Yes, projecting. That's the
Yeah.
word I was looking for. A lot of times when we see trolling happening in the space, how much of that are you kind of seeing in your day-to-day lives as folks who are more public and more in the kind of entertainment space? Is the balance always kind of more on the negative side, or is it kind of evening out for each of you? I'm going to go to
Well,
Alana on that one first.
again, I think there's a difference between trolling and harassment, though I
Yeah.
feel like probably now we've made them synonymous. Like that's the way the language has evolved.
Yeah.
I feel like what I'm doing is trolling when I trick people. I don't feel like I'm harassing anyone because I'm not actively saying anything negative to any individual. I'm making myself look stupid.
Yeah.
For my own enjoyment, I guess. I'm still getting people riled up, but
You still go back and laugh at the comments. Yeah,
I do. Yeah, I love them. I find it so fun. But harassment, like I don't feel like I get trolled very often in terms of like someone saying something that is with the intention of like tricking me. Obviously, like the Rickroll is still like a really common friendly one, that's like you just kind of get tricked and someone just lures you into something that you thought that you weren't being lured into. And I think that if it does happen to me, I really like it. Like, I think that's a really fun banter that I have with, you know, some of my audience on Twitch is if I make a mistake and then they just make fun of me like way more than it deserves. I find that to be like a really fun rhetoric. And I like doing that with friends as well, for sure. I also have particular friends on Twitter who I just go for all the time. Steve Spawn is probably my main one. I am
It's
like
so
exceptionally mean to him.
It's
People
so
will all the time go and message him and be like, "Are you guys
Are you
okay?"
yeah.
I love him so much, and it's so much fun to do. So trolling, I don't feel like is something that I experience a tremendous amount. I think the most frequent thing that I get trolled about, which is just people throwing it on something and not really like it having any context, is probably console wars stuff. I feel like I
Oh
get
yeah,
a lot of that. People talk to me about Cyberpunk all the time, and that stuff is definitely just them like throwing something at a wall that isn't even necessarily related to anything that I said. That is just like this talking point that they feel strongly about that they want to include me in. And I think a lot of the console wars stuff, like while those people feel very passionately about it, they also have no idea where I fit into it because I openly love Game Pass, but I also work at Sony. So they're like, I don't.
You hosted our Xbox podcast, right?
I
Like,
did. I did.
How do I?
They just get very upset about it. But that stuff is like probably the most common kind, and I just don't engage with any of it. Not because I feel like any of it is particularly harmful, and I don't feel like I'm being harassed or anything like that. It's just a volume thing where when you're in a position of being a public figure, like unlike how I treat Elon Musk, these people just really want me to reply. Like I have no interest in Elon replying. I am writing a tweet for his audience, not for him. Whereas these people are tweeting at me, and if I ever do reply, it's a flood of all their followers being like, "Oh my god, she replied to you. Oh my god, this made your day." And then I'm like, it's just not even like the banter isn't fun back and forth. It's only so fun as like they have the input, and I'm just like, whatever. So it's harmless, pretty frequent, but my way of dealing with it is not engaging because there's too much of it. It would be a giant waste of time, and they don't really want any genuine conversation or even genuine banter.
Yeah.
They just want a response. So I just walk away from it pretty much.
Greg, I'm curious too because as a kind of funny fan and as a part of the crew as well. One of the best things about what you all do is that you give each other a lot of crap all the time.
Too much sometimes, yeah.
and I'm curious about that because I remember very specifically there was a moment where you were kind of talking to one of your co-hosts who was kind of running the boards, and you and there was a moment where you felt like you had gone too far. I think you were talking to Kevin, who was running the boards, and it was nice to see you have that moment of contrition and say, "Oh wow, that is the person who I hurt." And I want to go through that really quick and just share a little bit about like what was the thought behind kind of going back and making sure that you had that trolling moment, but you wanted to pull back and say I want to make sure that I'm making this right with people that I care about.
I mean, that comes from years of experience and growing up. And I think to go back to what I was talking about in high school, of being so mean, right? And priding myself on my sharp wit, and I could take you out at the knees whenever I wanted to, kind of with a joke kind of thing, right? I remember going to college and still having that with me and joining a group in college called the Antlers. The whole thing since 1976 has been to get in the opposing basketball team's head, which means prank phone calls in the middle of the night. It means going to their campus and getting pizzas delivered at 3 a.m, like all this crazy stuff.
I mean,
right?
You're also a real life wrestler, Greg.
True.
And that's the thing. And like, I remember, in college, I always talk about, growing up there and becoming an adult there and learning from my people who are surrounding me there, my friend group that became my family in Missouri. And these people that were so salt of the earth and so good natured in a way I had never known a human being to be. And the fact that like I could lay anybody out, but like they never swung back. And it was this very hard thing for me to learn that like I loved my friends in high school, but didn't feel comfortable. I didn't know how to say that. You're kids, you're growing up, you don't know. And this is back in the time, when it was like, oh man, even hugging your male friend, whoa, what are you doing? You know what I mean?
Right,
like you had that weird, and I hope it isn't like that anymore, but it probably still is for kids growing up. Then to get to college and learn to be able to say to your friends you love them, learn that you've hurt somebody's feelings, learn you've crossed the line. I remember going back and talking to friends from high school and being like, I'm sorry. Like and they're like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I know we're cool. It's not about that. I know that I crossed the line. You jump ahead to kind of funny and you're talking about, 4 people who left their jobs and worked out of a spare bedroom where in the house where 2 of them lived, and tensions get high. You guys are both content creators. You know it. You know how much you pour yourself into this. And I always feel like I am one tiddlywink away from breaking down and losing it all. And so there are those highs and lows of celebrating with them. And then, like, you know, you talk about Kevin, like, Kevin runs the boards because one day Kevin walked into the studio, the spare bedroom, and found me crying at the desk because I just couldn't get OBS to do what I wanted to do. And he said, I'll do it. I'll take it over. And since that day, he's been in charge and learned to do it. Yeah. And I'm always long-winded. Sorry. The thing is, we've transgressed, and you've done that thing where you hurt each other, and we've been around each other long enough that, you know, we've all hurt each other by saying something and then not addressing it, and then having it be that steam in the kettle, right? That goes, and then finally you let it out, and it's like, whoa, you're this mad about something. I'm sorry, you know, and you have that out. And so like it sounds goofy, I know, but like we have a safe word. Like if somebody says pickles, the joke stops. We've crossed the line. This is not cool anymore. Sorry, this is too real. And you don't even need to say that as you're talking about. Like, you know, I say something and it's a joke. Everybody's having fun, and then Kevin, I can tell, has been hurt, or I know that I just don't want to be represented that way. I've gone too far, and you stop and you say it because, like, you know, my whole thing has been growing up in front of a microphone in terms of who I am to the audience, right? I've been doing this for 14 years. Like, you can go back and listen to game scoops and jokes I would make there where I would never say that. And I didn't have that life experience that I didn't know. And so to get here now and be working so closely with this team and building something with that team, like, there's such a big part of it of they're my family and I want to take care of them. And we can still have those jokes, but it can cross the line. And if I can dominate a little bit more of the conversation, something we're going to get into is then, you know, we keep each other so close in this community. And the whole thing is that, you know, that you're listening to a podcast, if I say 4, sometimes 5 best friends, I'm talking about you being the 5th best friend. You're listening. So many people talk about being in their cars and talking to their radio while I'm like, oh, that's so stupid, Greg, or whatever. That goes with the jokes too. And so we've learned that if you don't nip a joke in the bud, if it does hurt somebody's feelings and you just let it lie, the audience has no idea the line's been crossed, and they will tweet it. They will bring it up. They will make fan art. They will do these things. Like, we've had it in the, you know, jokes we've made about people who don't even work at Kind of Funny. You know, we'll start something with somebody who's a personality who's come through once or twice or whatever, or, you know, a fan who's been involved. And like the community then keeps using it on them in a way that is positive, but it is trolling. And if you didn't sign up for that, that's what people know you for. And they want to reference this one thing over and over. We've had to have full stops with the community of like, hey, everybody, and by the way, don't talk about this to this person anymore. Like, it was a joke we were making. We didn't realize it got out of hand with that's all they were getting in their chat when they were live. That's not cool. And again, you know, we're lucky that our community is small enough and passionate enough. They're like, oh, totally cool. Like, people aren't doing it to be mean. They're doing it because they want to be friends in the same way you give each other grief. But it happens to me all the time that I open my Twitter. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Pretty frequently at Rooster Teeth,
yeah,
where it didn't actually happen to me. But I also am really bad at figuring out when anyone's trying to be mean. I'm like, which is kind of a deficiency. But sometimes someone would, like, you know, a member of the RT community would walk up to generally a female member of staff and make a joke that someone had made on a podcast or something, that when the person on the podcast made it, it's 2 friends making the joke. But when a stranger makes the joke, it's a person you don't know. It's and it's, I think, you know, that's the issue with like the way that brands can feel like friends, is that there are barriers, that it's really complicated. Like, we still don't know how to talk about this stuff. Is that you can be trolled by an audience member in a way that it feels extremely hostile because it's someone who you've never seen before, but they've seen your face a million times. They know how you reacted to it on this thing. So it's this odd kind of one-way relationship, essentially. But that was definitely a common thing, that someone would kind of get what feels like harassment from an audience member because of a joke that was made on a podcast previously. And I think it's good that you guys address it. Like, I've never thought to do that. Never considered being like, hey, remember, this is for this room and shouldn't exist outside of it.
Again, we're lucky that, you know, it's that easy, that's what we, from day one, is what we built, right? This, you know, we weren't building it for you, we're building it with you, which goes so far. And like, you know, to bring it back to an actual more relevant example of negative trolling, right, is like when we were just doing the FCF, the fan controlled football stuff. We kept getting screwed over by calls by the refs. And so like I was being my very wrestling heel persona throughout it, cutting promos on Richard Sherman and all this stuff. And like, of course, it's back to the Elon Musk thing at that point, right, Alana, where it's like, Richard Sherman and Quavo aren't watching this 3-minute long video. And even if they were, they're laughing. What do they care what I say? You know what I mean? But when it was the refs thing and I was like super mad at them, I did 2 different tweets in the same game that were like, F these refs, fire these refs, yada, yada, yada. And then as soon as the game was over, I turned off my phone and went back to being a husband and hung out with my, wife. And the next day, the FCF was actually put up a poll because it's all fan control. It's like, should we get rid of the refs? Should we change the way plays are called? And I quote tweeted, I'm like, we won, blah, blah, blah. And I then looked at it that day and people were like, dude, you crossed the line last night and this is even further. And I was like, what? And I went back and looked at those tweets and there was like threads and subreddit threads about like, hey man, like I like when Greg does the heel stuff with Austin and like he's a bad guy in a professional wrestling sense, but like this is just blasting this man on Twitter, this ref that's doing his job, and people don't get that. And it was like the community putting me in check. And my knee-jerk reaction when I woke up was I read it. I put up a long Reddit post that was like, hey man, I'm doing this wrestling character thing, and this is what we're doing, yada yada yada, and I blah blah, and it's antler stuff, and people went in there and like, I want to say it was like a 96 response thread of like, we hear you, we understand what you're going for, but it's not working, and here's why. And it was like 4 hours later, I came back, read through it all, and I put up a thing like, you know what? I deleted the tweets. I'm done with that. That's not a thing anymore. And like, thank you for keeping me in check, because it goes both ways. Of we get it all the time where yes, we make a joke on the podcast, and it's what we were talking about earlier. You're in there. It's me and Nick. We're going back and forth on each other. We're having a great time. Awesome show. Show ends. Life continues. My car's got this problem. Portilla needs to do this. Oh, I forgot about that. Blah, blah. And then, okay, a moment of respite. And I open my phone 3 days later and somebody's throwing something in my face. And I'm like, what? Oh, this is that thing from the podcast. Damn it. All right. You know what I mean? Like you never know what mental state someone's in when that joke continues. Because for them, they're in the moment right there having the joke.
Yeah, and it happens often where you have the conversation of in group jokes versus out group jokes, and you have those things that happen often. And again, it is also super weird because of the work that we do, where time is not really a thing, where people are coming to your content at whenever they come to your content. So I've gotten so many messages and YouTube comments about a thing that happened a year ago that people will just like, Khalif, how could you say that thing? And how
I also think people remember the things that they've listened to more than the things they've said, because people will remember stuff that we said on a podcast and be like, you guys already spoke about this, but the four of us will be like, what?
The amount of times we'll be headlining a show, like great headline, and then Tim's like, wait, we did it 4 weeks ago. Like, what? Really?
Time is very, very weird in that way. And Gino also shares in our side chat about how just when you're having these conversations on the internet, when you're getting these messages from other people who you don't know, folks who are in our audience, there is no way to determine sarcasm. There's no way to determine, between, tone and how that stuff works. It's the reason why whenever I'm mad at someone in my life, I will make sure that I call them as opposed to texting them. That is a rule that I've made because I know that I can't get and convey tone in the way that I can just have the conversation with you. In that way, which I think is also really, really important for folks to kind of take into that space.
Especially like having studied writing at university.
Yep.
Like just love language in general. And, there are people who criticize the incorrect use of grammar or punctuation, but I think that it's actually something that's very cool is the way that language has evolved on social media. So if I'm saying something that is sarcastic, it's always lowercase. I will not use full stops. It will always be lowercase. If I am intentionally trying to be facetious or make a joke, my grammar and punctuation changes. And I think that works for some amount of people. Obviously, that means that you have to be versed in that kind of language, but I'm really specific about that. And I'm so interested in watching that evolve. And I saw this thread the other day that was someone basically highlighting all of Twitter's most overused terms. And like, I know that stuff grates on a lot of people, but I think it's something that's very cool. Like the idea of that's it, that's the tweet. Yes, that's something that is said a lot. And I can understand something being annoying if you see it frequently, but it is also a very specific facetious form of communication that anyone can understand, where if you write anything without that, it can mean something different.
Totally.
So I'm like very pro.
Right? It's letting you, it's letting you know, or as you look at it, right? It's a visual cue that this is in a meme sense. This is a joke. This is
the tone of what this thing is. And I'm like very for that stuff, like but we're not ready for that conversation yet. Like that kind of stuff that just like repeatedly shows up on Twitter is like, I've fully seen even people that I really love be like, oh my God, I hate this. This drives me crazy. And my response to that, as someone who's annoyed by almost nothing is, why do you care? It's just words. But on the other hand, I'm like very enthusiastic about it. I'm like, I think this evolution of the way that we're conveying jokes through text is actually really, really useful. And those repetitive phrases are just born of us not knowing exactly how to convey sarcasm over text. So I'm like extremely pro Twitter cliches because it's how we kind of have to adapt to communicating tone. So
they're signposts, right? And they help so much in determining that. And that was the thing today where like I did the thing I'm sure both of you have where I started up on a tweet, I had what I wanted, and I was like, oh wait, but like this is going to be taken out of context. So then I started adding tweets before I published to add the context. And then I have a Twitter thread that's 4 things long. And I'm like, they're just going to retweet the first thing. They're never going to, and I just deleted the tweet. I'm like, this isn't worth it. Like, what am I trying to say? And is Twitter with its 280 characters the best way to say it?
Yeah, it's hard, and I love that you shared that part, Alana, about kind of the language and how it has kind of morphed over the years. I remember being very, very mad some years ago because I was really tired and had nothing really to be mad about, but it was so upset about whoever decided that writing everything in all caps was screaming. And I was like, I hate this. This is dumb. Who made this rule that this is the thing? But it is a weird part of the internet culture that has, grown with us. That is,
I think it helps us.
Yeah, it's an interesting way of how to kind of have those communications when, again, I feel like there are some aspects to all of this that make so much more sense for not only where we've kind of landed in terms of internet culture, and we're going to talk about meme culture in a second because I think that's a really important part of this, but it's also one of those things of there's also this interesting distance that we've given each other because of the way that we communicate via text and also via social media aspects, where so much of that stuff, the running joke in in conversations with me and my friends around watching Marvel movies is like, man, you would not have so many superheroes if they would just go to therapy.
Totally.
It's like, it would be so much nicer if they would just talk to each other about half of the stuff that they were beefing about. Meme culture has been a big part of the way things have kind of evolved, not only in the way that we playfully troll with folks, but now we've seen that kind of grow into a much larger potential problem with how folks kind of come to conversations, how folks have used, visual aids to kind of help to demean people and put people into bad spaces. How are you both thinking about meme culture now? I remember, we talked about a little about Rick rolling and how that was kind of super fun and playful. But over the years, it's gotten really, really rough, and it's gotten kind of really, really harsh in those ways. Are you coming to meme culture understanding, one, because there are so many memes that happen at so many times that sometimes you have to catch up, and you're like, I don't even know what this meme is. Is this a bad meme? Is this a good meme? Like, what's the process for you when it comes to engaging in meme culture, and what are some of the tactics or things that you're seeing that are kind of coming up that are prevalent? Greg, I'm curious your thoughts about where you kind of landed with meme culture at this point.
For me, with memes and using them right, I like them. I think it's a shorthand, like we're talking about, right? Where most of the time you put something into a meme and you understand what's going on to, or what, the context of what's happening, right? Whether it's when I saw the other day when Paris was like, oh man, really excited for Outriders. I went and got the mean girl, hey loser, get in the car. We're playing Outriders, right? And send it to him, right? Like that kind of thing. That's where I'm using them. For me personally, it's a rule because I've screwed it up before. I won't use it unless I understand what it is, what is the context, where is this from? And I mean, that's more dialed into even GIFs, I guess. Because when Twitter added GIF reactions, I was like, oh man, yeah, I love this. And you put in shocked, you put in angry, you put in whatever, and you click and you use it. And I did it that one time, and somebody came back and was like, oof, Greg using a JonTron. And I was like, who is JonTron? Oh no, no, delete that tweet. Sorry, I didn't know who that was, and I didn't know. Sorry. And like that's the thing, right? Where it's like suddenly it has to be. You have to treat the meme, GIF, whatever it is that you're using, the piece of content you're using, like you use your words, like you treat your words and what you're going to say and how you vet what you're about to get into.
Yeah, Alana, I'm curious your thoughts about meme culture and how much you use it versus how much you don't, and how do you kind of engage in it?
Listen. So I smiled when you said that you felt like meme culture had gotten worse. So from the age of about 12 to probably 17, I frequented 4chan, very frequent. Maybe it wasn't that old. I might've been a little bit younger, which is such a good note that if you ever want to think about the kind of people who use 4chan, was a 12-year-old. So I thought I was a little edgelord. I was there for the beginning of a lot of memes. Like Halo is my favorite. is my favorite. Doesn't afraid of anything. He kills aliens. Like just like weird stuff like that. All your base belong to us. Like really, really old memes that were like kind of nonsensical. Some of them were also pretty problematic though, like pools closed, which if I'm to like explain that now, like just like read up on it, explaining it would be very weird. But like I was aware of that while it was happening. That, you know, at the time as a teenager, it was just like a thing that happened. But now I'm like horrified by the implications of what pools closed was trying to do. So it's a thing that I actually feel like has largely, as it has become more mainstream or normie, as they would call it on 4chan, has gotten a lot softer and a lot kinder over time than it used to be. But memes were, back then, I felt like it was almost just a way to express that you were a part of something. That was what it was intended to be, is like, hey, this is this community that I am a part of. We speak this language. That's kind of what a meme felt like to me when I was a teenager who was still very awkward and shy and nerdy and played video games. It was like going on a 4chan board. Again, just wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Like, not a part of my history I'm proud of. But it has evolved a lot since then, and now it's like Baby Yoda and Bernie Sanders and that kind of stuff that is still just people kind of making a commentary on a thing that's happening in a way that, again, I'm very pro evolution of language. So it's just a different form of language on the internet that I'm very much cool with. And I think it can be hard to keep up. Some of them I'm like, what is this meme about? What does this mean? And I don't actually spend very much time on Twitter. So like I miss things all the time. Like I missed Bean Dad. I missed whatever this shrimp cereal thing is. I never see any of that stuff and tend to find out via someone else telling me about it.
Somebody at the end is like, what did I miss today? They give you the whole rundown of
I'll
all
see
the
a reference. Like, I try not to
today.
go on, I said this last episode, I think I try not to go on Twitter until like 3 p.m. or so generally, like until at least the afternoon. I try to just like avoid it in the mornings. Some days I will, but mostly just like stay away. So I miss loads of stuff. And that definitely bit me in the ass on the day that the Capitol thing happened. What did I tweet? I tweeted something like all I saw was that Trump was being removed from Twitter, and I tweeted something along the lines of like, haha, wow, did I miss anything today? That is still a common thing to say, is like, haha, hey guys, what did I miss? Is like, it was all lowercase, you know, it's the same like kind of communication, but it turned out what I missed was a lot more serious than Trump leaving Twitter. And I was like, oh no, the context of this is absolutely terrible. And I got called out for that rightly. Like some people in my DMs were like, I know that you would not have said this considering what's actually happening here. That was the thing where I was like, okay, tweeting something reactionary where memes are concerned, you do have to still do more research, because the context of what happens on a Twitter day can be way bigger than what you have just seen, especially as someone who tries not to spend too much time on that app. Is like, if I'm going to have an input on a current event, which now I just try to avoid mostly, I need to at least have like you said, Greg, like understand the source of what this chain of events is. Yeah. Because the context to everyone else can be different to the context of what you have seen or what you're saying. So the short answer, memes were way worse and have gotten a lot better from the days I spent on 4chan, I promise. Seen some stuff I wish I could unsee. But I also think it is really just a community culture thing where, like, you know, Twitter has its own memes, Tumblr has its own memes, Facebook has its own memes. It's all just a way of showing that you are a part of a community that you can't otherwise do just through text, is because we all understand this thing. We are all conveying this thing in the same way. And again, that's why I'm pro. That's it. That's the tweet. This ain't it, chief. I'm pro all of it.
Well, especially talking about memes, right? You know, like you're talking about being a 4chan edgelord, right? Like I remember, I think that's such a rite of passage for our community, and I'm talking about gamers or people dialed into the internet, right? Because it was the same for me even way back in the day of getting in there, of feeling like, I found my people. You know what I mean? When I'd go to my Justice League verbal role playing thing, right? We'd go in there and chat room spar or whatever. It was that thing of like, you had that. And even, you know, when I, started dating my wife, when I met her younger sister is very active on the internet and super in it, is one of us, right? And it was that thing of like, when she finally was like, is this guy cool or not? She started showing me memes that her and her friends were passing around. And like, that is still the currency, right? It is still this thing of like, oh, let me show you. This is the funny one. Let's see this. Let's see that. And like, yeah, you know, by the time it gets mainstream and it is, all right, cool. Everybody's using, no, it's the Principal Skinner. Like, no, it's the children who are wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, all right, cool. That one's played out or whatever. But it still works for Twitter. It still works for what's happening.
Yeah, it's still a culture thing. It's just that the cultures have gotten bigger, I think. Whereas the stuff that existed on 4chan obviously has still, you know, if I were to tweet Halo is a pretty cool guy, enough people would know what that means. I actually think it wouldn't be most of my audience, but enough people would know what I'm referring to. But it's just that yeah, as these websites have gotten bigger, the amount of people who understand the memes have gotten bigger, and thus the culture has gotten bigger. But I could still try to show my mom Bernie Sanders meme, and she'd be like, "This is a picture of an old man."
There's impact font on this.
Like, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And again, I think it's cool.
And to your, you know, the Halo tweet, and then also just the tweet of, and I didn't miss anything today, right? Like, it's also something we not struggle with, but have to think about in the way of like, cool, I can come out and scream my head off about the refs. And if you're watching the game with me right now, if you understand we own a football team, haha, Greg's being crazy. If you just follow me because you liked me at the DICE Awards, or you think you want to know PlayStation news, you're like, what the hell is going on? And that's
Who is that Greg? It's not my Greg.
That's the hard thing of balancing, right? Of like, you know, something that can be a great joke to you that you think is hilarious. How many times have I done it? I'm like, I'll delete this because it's not worth the group of people who won't get it, or the one slice that would get it.
It's the struggle that I have when streaming pretty often is that I still don't know what to do about it. I was just talking about this the other night, is that I will make a joke on a stream that is catered to the people that I am streaming with. So I will make a joke that is, I know these three people I'm streaming with are okay with this joke. And that's what I'm going to say. But then I have to remember that there are also 1,000+ people watching that. And I'm like, I don't know who's the audience for my joke, because the way that naturally I want to be like, it's the people I'm playing with. They're the ones I'm trying to make laugh. They're the ones I'm having candid conversations with. But then you also have to remember that everyone watching may not feel the same way about the joke. And I think that's the thing. Like I said, I still don't know where I land on that. Like if I'm trolling my friends publicly, I'm doing it because I know they're okay with it, because that's the rapport that we have. But that necessarily isn't the case for everyone else. Like I made a joke the other day about Steve Spawn not being able to get up a staircase. He can't. He's very open about stairs being his nemesis. And it's like an ongoing joke that I know Steve is okay with, that I would never say to any other disabled person, that I'm only saying to Steve. But when I make that joke, I'm still saying it in front of 400,000 people.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Who am I going to upset?
And that's the thing, like knowing Steven being his friend too. Like he has the darkest sense of humor. He's the first person to use his disability as a punchline to get, especially to make people cringe. But if you don't, like, there's so many people who don't know him as that. And so like, even when he tweets that, he gets it all the time. But like, yeah, for you to come out, for us to come out and make those make a joke, even if it's just between us, he gets the joke. That's great. It doesn't matter when everybody else sees it. And they're like, yeah, it is fun to make fun of handicapped people. Like, whoa, no, that's not what the takeaway here was.
And that's why it's complicated, is because like I said, I still haven't figured out my answer to this, but where I land on it right now is that for me to take that humor away from Steve, who is a person that I'm very good friends with, who has fun with that, as a person I know personally, seems worse. Like for me to treat Steve differently publicly than as he would like to be treated, as he treats himself and as he treats me, I think feels like a negative impact on someone I personally know. That like, I think if I changed my sense of humor and I stopped bullying Steve, that would suck for him. But then I still have to think about trolling, sorry, not bullying. But then, you know, it is still a thing that I think about every time. I'm like, is this going to upset someone else? And I think if they were to talk about it, they'd be right. Like if someone would be like, you made this joke about a disabled person, how do you think I feel as a disabled person? That's never happened, but I still think if I got called out on it, which maybe it will happen at some point, I'd be like, you are right. I don't know what to do about this yet. I'm still figuring it out.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say the tactic that I have used in those circumstances, because for me, it's culturally too, right? There's some cultural jokes that go across, you know, folks within the Black community too, where it's just like, I will like Paris or somebody else who we were having a faux argument on the internet, and I was like, Negro, and people around the conversation were like, like, oh my God, you just said that word. How dare you say that thing? And I was like, well, this is a cultural thing that we, again, as folks in this community, we, you know, depending upon who you are, like it's an okay thing to say or talk about in that way. But with the way I've kind of given it to people is to say, we have decided, me and this person have decided that this is okay.
Yeah.
And we have had the conversation. If you choose to be upset by this thing, I can understand that, but understand that we are okay within the grouping that we're having that conversation. So I think that there's a good way to be able to do it so that you can verbalize it externally, so that
Yeah.
it's on the record.
Yeah.
So that way, when folks do come to you and say, "Well, I didn't understand that," or "Why did you say that?" things like, we have an understanding, and that's okay between us. I apologize if that offended you, and I'm sorry that's what's happened here.
Sure.
But I want to make sure that you understand that we have a relationship, and that's okay.
And that's always the struggle, right? Because it is that thing of, I'm right there with both of you, right? Of, there are plenty of times where I sit there and go, should I make this? And I'm like, well, it's me and I'm talking to this person, or I'm screwing around or whatever. Yeah, I'm going to do this. And that, of course, is what gives all of us personality. If you wanted this,
Right.
completely neutered, middle of the road, milk toast, like there's nothing, why would you follow that person? Why would you interact with their content? Why would you, if they're that, what's the draw there? Not that the anger is the draw, but the personality is. And so what the push and pull of it always is like, yeah, I'm going to do stuff, and I'm going to put out stuff that I believe in, and I back. And that if you're going to have a conversation like the ref thing, I'm going to engage in the conversation and go with it. It's just, for me, I've had more the other flip of it, right? Where it's not, I've offended somebody and they come and tell me about it. It's I've offended somebody and Greg Miller sucks, and I'm never gonna,
Right.
and it'll be years later. It'll be through somebody else that I'll hear, oh, well, I know that this person. And I'm like, whoa, what? Like, I would have loved to have addressed this. I would have loved to have had a conversation with that person, or the whoever's angry about it, but you don't get that chance necessarily, right? Because that's how Steve and I first met, is that we were doing, not me and him. We were both at PAX. I was doing Paxamania. And again, it's professional wrestling, and it's not, but it's us all playing a wrestling game and having characters and acting like morons. And as always, me being the bad guy, me being the heel. And at the Paxamania and PAX East before, I had gotten hurt at the very end of it. Dan Reichert really hurt me because he does not know how to do an elbow drop. He almost broke my ribs, and I was hurt. So it was this storyline to get to PAX West that I had been hurt. And so what I thought was a great gimmick was to come in a wheelchair and act like I was destroyed, right? And have somebody talking to a microphone and have me just be in the chair, and then at the very end get up and screw everything up for the champion, yada, yada, yada. And the room seemed to get it. The majority of people got it. I can't speak for every human being, especially the people who I'll get to in a second. They got it. Everybody loved it. They knew who Greg Miller was. They knew I was a bad guy. They understood the dynamics of professional wrestling, and that I'm the bad guy to lose. I'm here to get you over. I'm here for the good guy to win. But there was people there who didn't get that and didn't know me and thought it was a real shot at disabled people. And so they went and talked to Steve about it. And we're like, they came in there, they went to the Able Gamers desk booth, and they're like, this is happening. It's happening here. And Steve, to Steve's credit, was just like, I've had passing interactions with Greg Miller, and I see him online, and that doesn't sound like it, but we'll look into it. And so he emailed me and did a call with me, and I explained everything I just explained here. And he was like, understand it. I get it. Of course, I understand that. And we went through it, and it was this moment of like, that was on me. You know what I mean? That at no point, it's not that I, was like, oh man, like, what are you talking about? I was like, I see your side. It's always that empathy for me of being able to be like, I get it. And I transgressed here. And it was mainly the fact of my own privilege of, at no point did it even enter my mind that somebody might see that and think that disability was the butt of the joke. The butt of the joke in my mind 100% was, look at fat Greg Miller who's trying to cheat his way to the top, right? But like, that's the kind of thing you need to understand, is that it can play to that room. It can play to that fan base. So many people were there, saw it, and thought it was the funniest thing, and nobody ever said something to me like, you might be crossing a line, because we just didn't think in that context. But you remove it. You take one step out of it and you see it.
You can't know until someone tells you is a big thing. And that's like, one of my bigger issues with the idea of progressive stuff on social media is that a lot of the time it doesn't feel like it's in favor of progress, because it's like, you made a mistake and we would like you to die. And that can be really complicated. And I don't even think it's a PC culture issue. I think it's just human nature. We used to stone people in the streets for suspected adultery, is a thing that I feel like, it's just human nature to do that. And we're just not prepared for what that looks like on social media. But I'm, very pro people learning. And I will say, to your credit, Greg, you said something about me on a panel once that I was told about. People tweeted me or came up to me and told me about it. And it was a comment. It's a comment I didn't like.
I think I came to you.
You did. Okay. You came to me. So like, it was something that I did not like, but that I was not going to address. But then you came to me and like, hey, this is a thing that happened. Apologize if I offended you. like here's the context of all of this. And that was like an incredible thing to do because most people won't do that. Like that's a step to even have considered that. Like I don't know if anyone spoke to you about it. Like I said, they came to me about it. I don't know if they ever came to you about it. And we don't need to get into what it was, but it was still a thing that like most people don't do that. Like there's effort you need to make.
I think you knew me, and I'd like to think you knew me at least well enough then to understand as well. If somebody told you about it secondhand, you're like, well, he wasn't trying to actually get me. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's the I didn't
feel like you were trying to get me.
I feel so much of what we do is that, you know, and it's hard to explain if you don't do it, but podcasting or streaming or whatever is this constant high wire thing of trying to do this thing and yada, yada, yada. And I, you know, Damon Hatfield at IGN used to always describe my mind as I reached into the black hole, would grab something and throw it out. And it was usually some crazy joke or story or whatever. But it happens and it blows up in your face all the time. Or not blows up, but where I grab something and I throw it out and it's like, oh man, that was half baked. That, you know what I mean? Like, it's exactly what we're talking about. In a hour-long PAX panel where a million other things are happening, where I'm chugging beers and this is happening, blah, blah, blah. Like, hopefully most people aren't hung up on that comment unless, like, in terms of it being a serious attack or jab or whatever. But then it is that thing of, for me personally, that's the one thing I can't tell you the number of times the show ends and I'll turn to Tim and be like, did I cross the line with this? Did I do this? Blah, blah, blah. Because I've learned the hard way the amount of times that you say something that I think's completely in jest or is like totally just, but I know that it'll get translated to somebody through a game of telephone and all of that stripped out. It's that Greg on a podcast said this about this person. And that person's like, why would Greg say that about me? You know what I mean? And it's like, let alone at PAX where you're doing your own thing or whatever. It was PAX, right? Yeah. Where you're doing your own thing. You're on a million different, like, yeah. And so that's what I've learned a long time ago. Is like, yeah, I remember this. Yeah, we were going to put it up. So I was like, I'll edit this out. And you're like, that'd be great. I'm like, awesome.
I think I did say that. Yeah, because the comment was something that was like added negativity to a stereotype. But I knew that it wasn't a personal intent, but that's, I think, a really like good way to look at it that I'm probably not aware enough of is when your trolling could potentially affect someone. And there are people that I know, like Mike Bithel's really good at that. Zach Ryan is really good at that. Like people that I know that are like very good at being like, this could have potentially offended someone. Whereas like, I don't feel like I have enough awareness of that kind of thing, but maybe it's like a thing that being insular in that way can be really helpful, where I just tend to assume that nobody's offended by anything. I'm like, that's probably not the best way to go. It's just because that's how I operate. Is like very rarely does a joke ever bother me. So then like, it's just, you know, you have to work harder to relate to remember other people aren't necessarily the same as you. And it's a good thing to keep in check when you are someone who actively trolls.
Yeah, and it's great to see you two kind of work that out, right? It was one of those things that where folks don't have that kind of self-realization, or they're not kind of, you know, introspective in that way. And, you know, for everybody who's in the chat and you're thinking about good ways to kind of figure out ways to talk about all of these things, and you're hearing these conversations from folks who are at the top of their game, even, you know, going through the issues of trying to figure out how to find good words to be able to make those messages clear. You can go to find
this stuff out live in front of everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. How it works. Absolutely. Yeah. There's a great resources for this if you're looking to get into this and have more discussions and find more tools to put in your toolbox. You can definitely go over to findyourwords.org. There's a fantastic site over there to be able to go check out and find more resources to do that work and have, you know, good language and good tactics to be able to kind of do those things for yourself. And also there's a really great interactive video that the folks from Presence of Mind, KP and Cloud9 have put together. It is launching today. So you'll be able to go check that out. And if you want to check it out for another reason besides finding good tactics to be able to learn about mental health, connecting to your total health and the importance of making mental health a priority, and resources that are available for you to learn more, you can also win one of 5 C9 Secret Lab chairs that are beautiful. They are lovely. They are really comfy and they fit your behind. So that would be really, really good. May 27th, check out the stream then, and that's when we'll be giving that away. We'll be announcing the winners there. So make sure you check that out and go check out the video. There's a link in the chat right now. There's a chat bot putting that out as we speak. Before we get up out of here, because we have a couple minutes left, I think we talked a lot about kind of the external parts of this from the gaming perspective. I'm sorry, from the social media perspective, but within the gaming space specifically, you know, there's a lot of difference between in-game trolling and out of game trolling. I think the most kind of classic version of in-game trolling is the classic teabag that we see happen.
Tactical
crouching, as the young kids say. I feel like there's some spaces in there too that have kind of changed as well in the ways that we have learned to troll. We talked a little bit about, games like Among Us before we jumped on stream. I feel like that's a game that brings
Mm.
in trolling in some fantastic ways. Are there any other games that you think of that lend to either really, good natured trolling, or even some not so good natured trolling?
I think that's a really interesting question because when I'm thinking about it, trolling in game can completely ruin games for some people.
Yeah.
I built this tree in Minecraft, which I had to grow. So like I built the base of a tree out of wood, but then planted trees in specific areas, like by putting a bit of dirt on the side and then a tree in it, making sure they had the right amount of sunlight, the right amount of block space. So I basically built like this giant tree. Took hours, hours and hours and hours and hours.
I don't like where the story's going already.
Oh yeah, this
Yeah,
was
so
my heart hurts
some
already.
griefers came into the server and burnt the tree down. And to
Oh,
them, that's trolling. But to me, that was really upsetting. And I haven't
It's
touched
vandalism,
Minecraft
yeah.
since. Like I was like, you took something that I built lovingly, really carefully. Like it was
Mhm.
almost like Ewok-esque in that like even the outside of the tree, all of the branches connected and had like I loved it. And they burnt it out. That's still technically trolling, but it's something that just like really negatively impacted me. And I feel like that's a thing where I definitely troll in some games. Like I think it can be really funny in Sea of Thieves, but when you
Mm,
don't know the kind of attitude of the person that you're playing against, it can be really complicated. Like I find it very funny
Mm.
to break onto someone else's ship in Sea of Thieves and then just stand on their wheel. I don't even know if you can do it anymore. Just you just stand there so they can't move. And like that's still bad natured. I would only do it to someone who had tried to attack or engage in combat first, but it can still like really negatively influence someone else's play style. I definitely feel like people who use bots in a first person shooter that's competitive, even as someone who's not particularly competitive, can be very annoying to the extent where I don't want to play anymore. But to
mm.
them, it's funny. So like that is, I feel like a really complicated one to answer because you can completely ruin someone's gaming experience. And that's like the lowest thing on the list of the things I want to do is turn anyone off a video game. So I feel
Yeah,
like that's really hard.
yeah. I
Especially
know.
when you think about how busy everybody is, right? That
Yeah.
that person's 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an
Yeah.
hour to play a game a night, and you're screwing around with them. And, yeah, climbing on their wheel, like it sucks and it breaks your heart to think about. And like it was one of those that I had, I talk about like learning and growing up and all this stuff, right? Like I remember we did a video at IGN when Mag dropped. And it was Jim
Wow.
Riley, and it was filming me or whatever, playing it on PS3, and you could team kill in it. And so what it would be is that we would spawn in and I would just throw grenades all over the floor. And then I would troll and be like, well, why'd you kill me? Like, I didn't kill you. It was that guy. And I would start naming names of this other guy. And that guy's like, I didn't do it. And then I'd shoot that guy. And it was like, me and Jim thought it was the funny. We were like wheeze laughing and doing this. And we put the video up and everybody was like, this sucks. Like, why would you do it? And I was like, oh, again, perspective and not thinking. And again, it was my job to play games. I'm playing games for, at the time, 8 hours at my desk or whatever. Like this person that's their 1 hour to play that night and they're excited about it. That sucks. But the flip now is like you talked about Among Us. I love that so many developers have built games around that, right? Like when I think of Ultimate Chicken Horse, I think of how mad Nick makes me in that game by trolling me. But again, that's friends playing together in a very specific way that having my experience ruined is the game as he puts the atom bomb to blow up my thing or puts honey over here to get me punched by the punching bag.
Oh man, it makes me think of Fall Guys, stuff like that. Everyone gang up on Team Yellow. Yeah, don't grab me at the end. If you do that, I will find you.
Dude, Snow Like Mike, he'll stop there and he runs defense and grabs people just to screw with them.
It's the meanest thing.
He's so nice. Like, how is that dude doing that? That's where he lets it out.
I don't know. It's scary.
It is. I feel like I think that's a part of some people's personalities too. It's like they don't have that in most parts of their lives, and they're like in games. That's when they have that kind of moment.
Role playing.
Yeah, they're RPing being a troll.
Yeah.
A couple of really quick stats on trolling and online harassment too that I want to share with you and the community and everybody. Thank you so much for watching the stream today. It's been awesome to have you in the chat participating with all of this. More than 30% of online players and gamers have been called offensive names, been trolled or griefed around 34%, or purposely embarrassed or been embarrassed within a game. In terms of severe harassment, 38% of players have had at some point engaged in at least one severe form of harassment in online games. And for each type of severe behavior, around 20% of online players in games have ever engaged in this behavior or to some degree, and around 7% of folks within those spaces have been in that position frequently,
I'm
which is
surprised that's so low.
Yeah.
it's an interesting space where you would think that folks would kind of be, you know, kind of actually trying to do their part, and 34% or 35% does feel, in comparison to the ideas that we already had, does feel pretty low.
Yeah.
Which maybe is a good thing in the respect of more folks are playing with their friends, which is one thing I know that there was a great piece of work done by Dr. Kishana Gray around, voice in chat on Xbox Live. She has a fantastic book about that, and how the move to when everyone put on party chat, when party chat became a thing, how a lot of that decreased because you weren't playing in public rooms anymore, and how that kind of changed the landscape in the way that we kind of do things in that space. Yeah, it's been really interesting to have those conversations with folks like that as well. We're almost out of time for this week's episode. Any last thoughts on the topic of trolling from either of you? Anything that you want to share to the folks outside in chat land, in Twitch land, in all the places that this show will go out and reside? I'll let you go first, Greg, on that one.
I think it's just taking everything we said to heart, right? And it's know your audience, understand who you're trolling and what is your objective in trolling. Because with your friends, obviously, it can be a lot of fun. Obviously, you can have a good time, but are you going to cross that line? Let alone then think if you're going to go try to troll someone else that you don't know. Why? What are you doing there? What's the benefit of that? Like, it's, you talked about it earlier, right? Of how, bullies bully because they've been bullied or whatever. But it's also the fact that so many people bully or troll because they just know that negativity gets the attention. And I think it's so much better for everyone to go out there and be positive and then, engage with positive people rather than worry about negativity being the thing that will actually get you to comment or talk to each other.
Yeah. Alana, last thoughts?
That was the same thing I was going to say, is like a part that I feel like we maybe didn't cover is know your audience. Is you can troll, just know who you're saying it to, their familiarity with you, like how they might read it. I'm not going to ever go to someone that I don't know and start trolling them as a person. And I also think there is a big difference between harassment and trolling. Again, the language has changed there, but harassing someone or doing something repeatedly is beyond trolling. Even if you think it's a silly little joke, but if you're doing it over and over and over again, that becomes harassment. And you need to be careful of that kind of thing. And just know which people take which jokes which way and how they conduct themselves. And I think we can all be a little bit better about how we react if we're called out for a joke going wrong. Is not to say it was just a joke. People aren't always right. Like if something upsets them, it doesn't necessarily mean they are right, but I don't see any downside in trying to make the most amount of people happy as possible.
Yeah. And I'll leave with that similar thought of it's okay to say you were wrong. It's totally fine to take the L, put it on your own forehead, and walk away. And
save it.
Totally
what in 2 weeks we're back and we're talking about maturing in the spotlight. That's my whole talking point. Don't even get me started yet.
Oh my goodness. Yes, we'll be back in 2 weeks. We do this show every 2 weeks. And again, thank you to the folks over at Cloud9 and the folks at Kaiser Permanente for having us host this. Everyone in the chat, thank you so much for being here. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks for more Presence of Mind. We'll see you very soon, and we'll be out of here. Peace.